Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Good to see you guys. So it's Tuesday, the 15th of September, and we're about ready to get another one of our meetings in for Intro to Philosophy. So if you're here and you're watching, welcome back. Just kind of chill and get comfortable, and got about 4 minutes, and then we will get things started. Hi, Rachel, Cameron. Anybody who's here, just feel free to say hello over in the chat. Hi, Dewey, Alexandra. Welcome back, everybody. Hope you had a good weekend. Hello. Good to see you guys. How are you doing with these fires? You guys breathing okay, or how's the air? I don't know. Over here in Long Beach, it's not great, but you know, it's not as bad as it is up north. Yeah, that's tough. I like both teams. I'm from LA, but I'm kind of more a fan of the Lakers, I guess. I guess just based on being from LA, I would say the Clippers. But I have a lot of respect for that guy Jokic on Denver. I think he's really good for a big man at passing. So yeah, when does that game start? Is it at 6? Does it start at 6? Probably it does. I think that they don't start them later than that during the whole bubble playoffs. Yeah, so let's see. It'll be exciting. I mean, if they lose though, the Clippers curse is real. Like I think they've lost some crazy, like 6 games when they had a chance to move on, or maybe 6 games they're facing elimination or something in the second round. Yeah. Hello, Elena. Good to see you there. Yeah, I watch a little. My brother's a big Raiders fans and stuff. I know the NFL's back now, so I'll probably catch a few games with them. I'm not as big a fan of that league as maybe NBA and some other sports. Like I love tennis too, but yeah, I check in. I follow along. A new team in LA, but I haven't really been following the Chargers and stuff yet. But yeah. It's good to have some sports though. Bring a little bit of the old routine. I'm kind of sad that I can't go out and run right now because of the air. That was definitely my go-to like fitness routine all throughout the whole pandemic. But give me a few more days, I'm sure maybe these winds will blow through and get a little bit less AQI in the air. What about you, Dewey? You watching NFL? You got a big team that you watch or follow? You can let me know. Hello. Hi, everybody. Seahawks. Yeah, Seattle. I had a friend that was big time fan of the Seahawks and stuff. So yeah, everyone's got their team, I guess. Cool. So yeah, we're almost ready. Just another few seconds, and then it's 6 o'clock. Yeah, Lakers fan. Yeah, I like the Lakers. And I've always liked LeBron too. So it's kind of now that he's with the Lakers, it's even cooler for me. I mean, he turned it around though. This year, getting back to the finals. Been a long drought out here in LA, 10 years or whatever, waiting for something good to happen. So yeah, I think it's all set for big Lakers with championship. But we'll see. They got a lot of rest. And these other two teams killing each other out there. All right, guys. So welcome back. It's 5:30. Glad to see all you guys here. So thanks for being here. And I have a couple of things I want to start the meeting with. First of all, did any of you guys notice my message over the weekend that I sent? I think last on Thursday after class, or maybe it was Friday morning. But the paper prompts. Anybody notice that one? Let me just make sure. Confirm to me that it's been sent. And then we'll talk a little bit about that. Yeah, if your screen quality Yeah, so Dewey, you got to go back and check, man, because everybody got it. It's not been sent to some people. It's been sent as an announcement through Titanium to everybody. So you got to definitely go back and look at that. The paper prompts should be in your inbox to your school emails. Maybe anybody else. Yeah, so it's there. Dewey, before class is done, on another window, can you just make sure you got it? I don't want you to miss this. But so let's start off by talking about the papers, okay? So as you guys know, the first papers are due according to our syllabus schedule. Let me pull this up here. I'm looking at my own syllabus right now. So yeah, due date of the paper, it'll be 2 weeks from today. That's the 29th, right? Yeah, so September 29th. And all you got to do is write a 3 to 4 page paper on one of the 2 topics that are listed in the prompt document. So I'm reading from the prompt document right now, and this is what it says. You must write a 3 to 4 page essay, double-spaced, on one of the topics below in 12-point font with normal margins. Okay, good. So it's definitely got to be according to that format. You got to make sure that it's not got like way bigger letters or something, or way smaller letters or anything like that. Just it's 12-point font, and it's 3 to 4 page paper. So about the page length requirement, I'm a little flexible if you go over the page length requirement. It's fine to exceed 4 pages. So if you find yourself and you're like getting to the bottom of the 4th page and you're like, I have more to say and I haven't finished it up yet, don't worry. Just continue on a little bit more, and do feel free to exceed the upper boundary. You don't need to, but you may. But if you went below the lower boundary, that's not good. So the lower boundary is more of a hard boundary, and the top boundary is flexible. If you wrote less than 3 pages, basically, it's probably not going to have enough detail or analysis to be the best, most successful paper that you want. So anyway, I'm just going through it line by line. The first thing is what is the format. So it's got to be 3 to 4 pages. But if you need to go beyond 4, that's okay. Just don't let it be less than 3. Now, I'm looking at things that are written here in the comments. You say, could we just cite evidence from the notes directly? Well, yeah, you can do that, but you're going to be using the book, your own common sense, and your class notes. So, I mean, you will, when you write like specific quotes out of the book, you'll place the quote in quotation marks, and you'll give a page reference. You'll put the page number in parentheses. So the only citation requirement that I have for you, you're encouraged to include some quotes from the textbook to give support for your analysis and to reference what you're talking about in your paper. When you have direct quotes that are taken from the book, all I'm asking is that you put that quote inside of quotation marks, and then at the end of the quoted passage, just add the page number in parentheses. Brianna, the prompt, it's been sent to you. It was sent to you on Friday. So just go into your emails and you'll see it there. I'm talking to everybody about those prompts right now in this class meeting to start us off. Okay, everybody, so we're clear on one thing. Now, Brooklyn, do you want us to cite your lectures as well? No, you don't need to do that. You could if you wanted to, but I'm not a source. I don't have any ideas. I'm just teaching you from a book. So this book is really what you're learning from. Just use the book as a source. When you have anything that you want to cite, go to the book. Go to the book. Use the actual book. Thank you. Okay. Now, you're going to write on, it's double-spaced, so it's 3 to 4 pages double-spaced. Make sure that you stick to that format. Do we need to include the author in the citations? Well, just the page number. Yeah, just the page number, Andrea. The author is someone whose name you're going to mention, I'm sure, in the writing itself. You'll be like, Anselm says, quote, and then you'll like put the quote there, and then it'll just say page 15 or whatever, and then you're on to the next sentence. You don't need to include a works cited or bibliography. No, I don't want a works cited or bibliography because there's only one work that you can use, and it's this textbook. So since you're not allowed to use any other sources anywhere in the whole universe, it would be, I think, additional labor for no reason to have you create a works cited, because it would be like, hey, remember, this is the textbook. But everyone knows that's the textbook. So it's not a research paper. In a real research paper where they ask you, go out into the world, go to a library, find like go to the internet, find 4 or 5 different sources, bring them together, and put a list of citations, bibliography at the end. And I'm not asking you for that. This is just based on the textbook. It's the only resource. So there's no need for works cited. When you do use quotes, though, I just want them to be quoted in quote marks with the page number in parentheses. Okay? Yeah, page number at the end of the sentence, so I know as the grader and the reader which page to go to find the passage that you placed in your paper. That's all. I just need to know the page from the book where it is. Okay? You say the paper will be posted on titanium, correct? Carl, I just want to understand your question. What are you asking? Your paper or the prompt? What do you mean? Let me know, Carl. The paper will be posted on titanium. I just want to understand your question so I can give you the right answer. What is it that you're asking about being posted on titanium? The finished product? No, it won't be on titanium. No, it'll be sent to me as an email. You're just going to send me a straight up email, rvulich@fullerton.edu, and then you're going to send it to me that way. Send it that way. Don't use titanium. Send me an email. Here's my email address. It's in the syllabus too. Okay, see it there. That's my email address. It's in the syllabus too. It's just R first initial for Richard, then my last name, Vulich, V-U-L-I-C-H @fullerton.edu. Okay. You're asking Ricardo what about the title? About what the title of your paper should be, or what the title of the email should be in the subject line? It's a very detailed question. If that's it, just let me know though. For the email, it doesn't matter. You could just say paper 1, or I don't want to give people a ton of rules on that, but I'm always answering every email. And when it's close to the date, I know that what's coming to me is probably the paper. But if you want to be helpful to me, you could just say like paper 1 or first assignment or religion paper, whatever it is. You know, just give me a little indication of what's in the message. But I don't have a standardization. A+ paper, there you go, HA, that'd be fun. Okay, yeah. All right, so far, everyone's following me. I'm just answering your questions as I see them, and I am going over the prompts. Not to worry, Carl, it's good. I want to answer all those questions. So Gabriel, could we before the due date come to your office hours with some completed essay for help? Yes, good question, Gabe. I invite and encourage anybody who has any questions about their paper to seek me before the due date so I can give you any comments or at least discuss your material. You could do it during an office hour, and that'd be great. You could also, if that doesn't work for you, just send me the paper as an email, and I'll find time to give you an email reply. The only thing is, though, if you do that, it would be best for you to get me a message a few days at least before the paper is due, because it'll be due on a Tuesday, and basically, if you send me your draft and it's like Monday or something, I teach kind of late into the day Monday, and I might not have a full opportunity to look at all the drafts if they're coming in that late. So anybody who really wanted comments would be better served by trying to at least have some, even if it's a sketchy partial draft, that I could look at heading into prior to the weekend before, if not earlier. Okay. So I'm telling you, I'm happy to look at drafts, either in office hours or via email messages, but I would just hope that you got it to me at least before that weekend of the paper being due, so that I would have enough time to go over all the drafts and offer some good comments. Okay. Yes, you can send the paper as a PDF. You can send it as a docx file. You can send it as Google Docs. I'll accept all formats, but it does have to be a typed submission, which follows the format guidelines listed in the prompts. Okay. Do you want us to have a header that has our name, course name, your name, and date? Okay, good. And I was just about to talk about the header information too, Andrea. So hold that thought, and I'll go over that in a minute. So anyway, it's 3 to 4 pages. It's double spaced. It can't be single spaced. It can't be more than double spaced. So I'm very strict about the little details of those things about format. Like, for example, when it says 12-point font, you can't make it 12.5 or 13 or something bigger. And when it says double spaced, you can't extend to make it double and a half or something. Sometimes students, they're exhibiting a lack of confidence in their writing ability when they do that, because what they're trying to do is like get to the page length minimum with less writing, with less words. So making words bigger, making additional blank space, making the margins expanded so that there's a tiny little postage stamp of writing in the middle. All of those little things you will not do in this paper. You'll just turn in a standard 12-point font, normal margins, double-spaced paper, because I want it to be enough writing. Okay, so we won't, go into those little tricky things, and I wouldn't think you would either. About the header, so I like for there to be a minimalist header on the first page if you're going to put it on the first page of writing. 10 information, a giant font for your title, and then finally we get started writing, and we're like 3/4 of the way down the first page. That does not count as a page of writing. So I would ask that you just keep it very minimalist. No, it does not have to have my name, the course name. It doesn't have to have school name and all that other stuff, and student number, birthday, height, weight, eye color. I don't need all that stuff. Just your name, the date, the essay title in a normal 12-point font, and then go straight into the first line of the first paragraph. I want that header to be small on the first page. Now, if you want to provide all the additional information and you want to have a big, flashy, giant font title, then here's my rule. In that case, you're going to create a cover page. And on the cover page, go crazy. Just have as much stuff there as you want. Name, date, professor name, class name, institution name, all of that. So you have two options. Minimalist header, where there's just like 2 lines of small information at the top and the title. Or if you want, a big full page cover page. And then on the first page of writing, you're starting at the very top of the first page. Okay? Now, people are asking me about MLA. I always get this question. And my answer to you is, I don't even know what MLA is. So you're just going to have to adhere to the format guidelines that are written in the prompt. I've published books. I've published essays. I'm a published author, and I have no idea what MLA even is. So you guys asking about it can tell me, what is MLA? I have no idea, but it doesn't matter. The only thing you need to know is it's 12-point font, it's double-spaced, okay, and it's normal margins. You don't play with the margins, don't play with the spacing, don't play with the font, and that's the format that I want, and that's the format I'm going to get from you, and that's it, okay? So yeah, that's about MLA. What's the other thing? Chicago style? I don't even know what either of those are. Yeah, name, date, title. Name, date, title. 12-point font, and we start the first paragraph. Okay, good. So it's due as an email attachment to me no later than class time, no later than 4 p.m. on the date of Tuesday the 29th. Now, you may not consult any electronic resources to write this paper. You cannot use anything off the internet at all. You can't use anything that any other human being ever wrote in this world except for the textbook, your own brain, and your notes, okay? So it's not a paper where you're allowed even to open a web browser and seek out anything online about it. If you want to read stuff online just for your own knowledge, okay. But you can't bring that into your paper and use the language of other writers in your own paper. That's going to be considered plagiarism. You can't do that. I don't think you should even want to do that, because who wants to go out and do research? Do you really want to open your computer, go on the web, and look up 10 articles on an ontological argument and try and bring all that information together? You should have just been watching the lecture and reading the book at that point, right? That's additional work for you. So I don't want you to do it, and you're not allowed to do it. I want you to make believe. I want you to pretend something with me. I want you to pretend you're taking this class 100 years ago. What's the internet? What's even a computer? It doesn't exist. They're just books. It's just books and you, okay? And the only book in the universe is this book, okay? So the internet doesn't exist, and it won't be created for maybe 100 years, okay? You're going to take this class like people took these classes for thousands of years. So I'm not going to let you use the internet. The internet's a great tool, but this isn't YouTube university or something. This is not a TED Talk. This is like real college. So I want you to actually read the real book and turn in a paper that only uses that book. So if you used anything off the internet, it's not okay. And what are you asking here? Yeah, Google's gone. There's no Google. Oswald versus Times New Roman font. About the font, I don't care. It's got to be 12-point. I like Times New Roman personally. I think it looks the most standard. I think it's the most widely used. A lot of people use Cambria. It doesn't matter to me. You mean the textbook online? Yeah. The textbook, if you're finding it an electronic copy of it, that's fine. So don't overthink my little rule here. I'm just telling you, I don't want, for example, someone to say, oh, and I found this from www. Cambridge Encyclopedia of Philosophy.com, like, and then you put that, even if you put that in the works cited, I don't want it, okay? Because I don't want you to cite any work. There's only the textbook. It's just you in this book. You in this book alone in the whole universe. There's nothing else, okay? I want you to pretend the computer's a typewriter, okay? It's just a typewriter. You just type words on it. They can't even web browse. And then you type a paper up on it, and that's how you're gonna write it. Okay, now, so it's worth 15% of your total grade. That's the smallest of the 4 things in the class. There's the midterm, the final, and the second paper that come later. But this first thing is just 15% of your grade. You want to do well on it, but it's not the hugest value of any assignment. And then there's 2 prompts, okay? So I'm now going to read off these prompts and go over them a little bit. You have to choose one of the prompts. Do not write on both, okay? Make sure you know that, because there's been a few confused students in the past that misunderstood this and tried to write on both topics. But that's not what I'm asking. They're optional, 1 or 2. You write on one and then don't write on the other. If you wrote on both, it would present problems with grading. Because first of all, if you try to cover both in the page length that you've been given, there's not going to be enough discussion of each one. So in a way, it's not enough, but it's also too much, because I'm not asking for both. I'm only asking for one. So just pick the one that you think you can report on better, that you understand a little more, or that you find more interesting, and that's the only one that you write on, just one of the 2. Now here's the first one. It says, well, first of all, let me say this. They're both papers about philosophy of religion, and they both ask you to compare and contrast 2 arguments for God's existence, and then to also present a set of objections to those 2 arguments. And basically, whether you choose prompt 1 or 2 depends on whether you want to report on the ontological argument and Pascal's wager, or if you want to report on the cosmological argument and the argument from design. So the first prompt gives you the option of ontological argument versus Pascal's wager. And here's what it says. So I'm just reading it. It says, discuss the ontological argument and Pascal's wager and provide 2 objections to each. Okay. Then it says, is one of the arguments better than the other? If so, why? If not, why not? Okay, so to go into that, basically, you're going to describe and explain the 2 arguments. You're going to tell me, how is it that St. Anselm tries to prove that God exists? So, you know, you'll go to the book, you go to your notes, you go to the lectures that we've had, and you will distill that information and give me a very clear and well-stated summary and breakdown of the argument and all the little steps of his argument, okay? And you would do the same thing with Pascal's wager, okay? You'd tell me how Pascal's wager works. So, for example, the ontological argument. God, Anselm says, is defined as the greatest conceivable being. All people define him that way, even atheists. So he exists in the mind. But there are things that also exist in reality. Now, which kind is he? Is he only in the mind or in the mind and reality? Well, since he's defined as the greatest conceivable being, he must exist in both. That's his argument. Otherwise, he wouldn't be the greatest being you could conceive of, because it's greater to exist in both than just the mind. So he exists, and he can't even be thought not to, because it's greater to be not capable of being thought not to exist than to be capable of being thought not to exist. And therefore, since he can't be thought to not exist, an atheist is not really thinking of God when they make the statement or claim that there's no God. Pascal's wager, you know. Pascal says that we can't really prove whether God exists or not, but we know that he either does or doesn't. So in a way, it's kind of like we're forced to wager on it as though it were a coin flip of heads or tails. In heads or tails, you don't know which side will land, but you know it has to be one of the 2. Well, with God, he says, we don't know whether he exists or not, and we'll never know. But it's either the case that he exists or doesn't, so we've got to bet. And he says it's a forced wager because you can't choose to decline to bet if you don't want to take a position. That's equivalent to not believing. So what are the stakes? And then he presents the stakes. The stakes are, on the one hand, believing, where you might be correct, in which case you go to heaven, or you're wrong, in which case nothing happens. But if you don't believe, then being wrong poses serious costs, like maybe not going to heaven or even going to hell. And being right doesn't really offer any reward. So in the one hand of believing, if you could win, and if you win, you win everything. If you lose nothing. And if you don't believe, then if you win, you win nothing. And if you lose everything. So he says there's a safer bet here and there's a dangerous bet. So go with the safer bet. And he thinks that's just reasonable to anybody who wants to avoid risk. So those are the 2 arguments mentioned there. Now it says after that in the prompt that you also have to provide 2 objections to each. which means a total of 4 objections. So 2 objections to Pascal and 2 objections to Anselm. Now, with respect to the objections to Anselm, there's many options from our text that we've studied. There's Gaunilo, who talked about the lost island. There's G.E. Moore, who said existence is not a predicate. There's also William Rowe, who said that you cannot just define something as existing and then claim that that's proof of its existence. And he gave the example of magic hand to make his point there. Okay? With Pascal's wager, there are also some objections, but all the information that you might want or need to report on paper number 1. But I would advise that you hold off if you're wanting to write on number 1 for at least until after our Thursday meeting, because, or you can get it started, but maybe delay the presentation of the objections to Pascal until after that, because you'll be fully informed after those lectures as to what the different objections to Pascal actually are. One is W.K. Clifford, and we'll talk about that today. And the other main objection that we have to save for Thursday is Robert McKim, The Hiddenness of God. Okay, so there's a couple of essays to follow that will serve as possible objections to Pascal. Now, the last part of the prompt says this. It says, is one of the arguments better than the other? And if so, tell me why, which one, and if not, why not? So that last element of the prompt is where you, the student, would give your critical judgment and analysis based on your viewpoint, which of the 2 arguments between the ontological argument and Pascal's wager, which one did you think was more persuasive, reasonable, or compelling, and why? Now, you have that task in the paper to tell me which of the 2 arguments was philosophically better than the other. And when you figured out which one you thought was better, you'll tell me which one, and you'll say why you thought it was better. And when you say why it's better, it has to be like you're a philosopher saying why it's better. So you don't just say, I like it because, shrug your shoulders, who knows? It's just, this one was written by a guy named Anselm, and I like anybody whose name starts with A. You know, that's not the kind of, intellectual defense of the author's argument that I want. You have to tell me why you think what he argued for made more sense or seemed likelier to be true or correct, why it was more persuasive or well argued, okay? And then on the other hand, you might say, well, I looked at both arguments, and to be honest with you, I couldn't pick a winner. Neither one looked better to me, so I don't think there's a better argument between the 2. Okay, well, if that's what you think, then I'm interested in that reaction too, and then I want you to philosophically justify that reaction. I want you to tell me, why is it that they're equally flawed or equally strong? Or, why is it that the defects of the 2 arguments are kind of on an equal footing? So you're going to have one of 2 possible reactions. You're either going to say, I liked one of the arguments better, and if you did, you're going to tell me which one and why. And if you didn't think one of the arguments was better, then you're going to tell me why not. So that's how the essay would end. That's the overall kind of breakdown and guidance to you for prompt number 1, okay? But there's a second prompt too, so I'll talk to you about that. The second prompt has to do with the other 2 big arguments that we studied on the existence of God, the cosmological argument and the argument from design. And so it's just like the first prompt. The only difference between that and the first prompt is the argument and the argument from design, and provide 2 objections to each. Is one of the arguments better than the other? If so, why? If not, why not? Okay, so again, now in this other prompt, the option is to write on cosmological and design arguments. So first of all, you would break down and summarize the arguments, referring to the text, citing quotes if needed, or I suggest that every essay should probably have at least a few quotes, from the book as support. But anyway, you'll break down those 2 arguments using those resources. Now, the cosmological argument, brief summary again, just to get your mind on the topic. Everything's got to have a cause. He gives the example of a sphere that one sees in the forest. He says that would lead anybody to ask how'd that get there or what's the cause of it. So this helps him to illustrate the principle of sufficient reason, which says that in the case of anything that's true, there has to be some cause for it. There's an explanation or a cause for any positive fact. Okay, after that, it's mentioned that there's contingent and necessary truths. Contingent truths are things that are true, but they could have been false. Like I don't know, the NFL season started this weekend. That's true, but I guess maybe they could have made a decision to cancel it if the pandemic had been so intense that they couldn't safely hold games. I don't know. So it happened, but it might not have happened. Or you're watching this lecture right now, but you might have overslept, or it's middle of the day, so I don't know if you're still going to oversleep, but you might have just, I don't know, gotten into an accident or gotten sick or something that might have prevented you from watching. So I'm glad you're watching, but you might not have, so that's contingent. Then there's necessary truths. Necessary truths are things that are true but couldn't even possibly be false. And that takes you into the area of, like, I don't know, mathematics, geometry and stuff, that 2 + 2 is 4, or that there's 3 sides on a triangle. Okay, so just to repeat, we start off by putting the principle of sufficient reason on the table. And then to add to that, there's a mention of necessary and contingent truths. Following that, the claim is made that this universe exists. And this is obviously something that he thinks is contingent, that the universe exists. Is it advisable to incorporate science facts in our essays or not? Yeah, sure, I would be fine with that. You know, if you had anything in mind, you could maybe give me, hit me with a message or something, let me know what you're thinking, but it sounds like that would be okay. At the same time, science, sometimes people dispute, you know, scientific conclusions. So if you really have something scientific, maybe you could bring that in as a citation. Since it's not philosophical, there would be no risk of plagiarism in that case. So I want to give you the maximum freedom, consistent with, you know, not using additional philosophical resources. So you could cite some scientific facts or literature if you really wanted, if it helps advance the argument of your essay. Okay, but back to the cosmological argument. So there's a principle of sufficient reason, there's necessary and sufficient truths, and then the point is made that the universe is contingent, and it's true that it exists. So if the universe is contingent, there must be a cause, according to that principle. So what's the cause of the universe? There's not a lot of things that it could possibly be. One thing that it can't be is that it causes itself, because nothing can cause itself. If it did, then it would already have existed to cause itself, and therefore it wouldn't have needed to have been caused. So the universe can't cause itself, that's illogical. But also, it can't be that something contingent causes the universe, because in that case, it would have to have its own cause, since it's not, you know, independently existing if it is contingent. Therefore, that would lead to an infinite regress, which is claimed to be something that's not possible. So if there can't be an infinite regress, there must be a first cause that's not contingent, and that would be God, who is a necessary being. Okay, so that's just me trying to summarize that argument. The other one was the design argument, and if you remember, it's the one by William Paley, which says that if there's anything that has a purpose or a function, then it must have had an intelligent creator. And basically, in Paley's argument, the example is given of a watch. He says, well, if a person found a watch, they would know that this watch had to have originally come about from some kind of intelligent mind, because the parts of the watch have to all be carefully assembled in the proper order so that it will perform the function of time telling. And a thing like that, the author thinks, we can all recognize could never have happened randomly or just by luck or chance. You know, just elements in nature somehow fuse into a watch. That could never happen. So it must have taken a mind to produce the watch. So if a thing has a purpose like a watch, or complexity of parts to perform a function like a watch, then it must have had a maker. Then the analogy is given that there are things in nature, the works of nature, like of the eye or the ears or the nose. You know, there are things in nature that perform a function, and only because of the very sophisticated inner complexity of the parts that make it up. In this case, biological components instead of like man-made components, but nonetheless, an eye is something that's very impressive in terms of its function and complexity. So it must have a creator too, in line with what we said about the watch. So that creator of nature is God. Okay, and then the objections that are asked for those different arguments, the best place to find them is going to be from the article by Ernest Nagel, Does God Exist? Because in Does God Exist, he does give various criticisms of the cosmological argument and the design argument. So going back to his work, you'll find him there. To the cosmological argument, he said, is it really true that everything has to have a cause? That's not obvious. But even if it did, it wouldn't really be consistent to say that God doesn't have one, though. So how can it be consistent to say everything has a cause but not God? Wouldn't he have to have one? At the same time, if God didn't have to have a cause, and we accept the principle that there could be an uncaused necessary being, why not merely assume that it is the universe itself, which is the uncaused necessary being, instead of God? And then the last point was that maybe an infinite regress is not actually impossible. It seems conceivable in math and in geometry. So maybe there could be actual infinity in terms of the events that lead up to the present moment. And then to the design argument, he said that the assurance that the watch has a maker is just because we've never seen a watch that was not designed by a human, and that's obvious because we make those watches. But when it comes to the eye and things that are in nature that have a function, those functional things that are in nature can be explained without assuming the existence of a designer at all. And that alternative assumption, which he claims is better supported by scientific evidence, is theory of evolution and Darwinian biology. Okay, so you have your choices. You know, you've got these two different paper prompts that you can choose from, and depending on which one you find yourself a little more comfortable with, a few words, and then we'll move on and we'll go over some lecture topics for today. The style of writing in a philosophy essay is a little bit of a different genre of writing than maybe what you're used to from like English classes. So in like an English class, I know that they always really try to reinforce the format of the classic standard English essay. So they'll impress upon you the following steps. Make sure that you have a clear thesis statement in your introductory paragraph, and then develop the thesis in the body paragraphs. And at the end, summarize what you have done and cap it off in a concluding paragraph. Now, that's a good general approach. But in a philosophy class, especially when we have this kind of short targeted paper that's not research paper length, it's more important to just jump right into the body paragraphs and start attacking the prompt directly. So I actually usually advise students to dispense with the conventional introduction and conclusion and just go straight into the body paragraphs. I don't need a thesis. You can just start attacking the prompt in the first sentence. What I kind of dislike, and what a lot of philosophy, I believe, professors dislike, is when you kind of spend a lot of time in the paper going on in the first paragraph, just trying to clear your throat and say what the topic is. You know, sometimes people get very long-winded in that first paragraph, and to be honest, it's filler. So like a person might say, you know, from the beginning, the dawn of man, questions about God and the divine have perplexed the human mind, and some of the greatest thinkers in history have struggled over these questions. What is God? What is life? What does it all mean? Well, I'm here to tell you, it's the year 2020, and I have my own opinion about these different arguments. Today, I will talk to you about these arguments, and we will engage on a vast philosophical, like all this stuff that you're saying, you could just skip, and you could just go straight into St. Anselm's ontological argument tries to prove that God exists by starting off with the definition of God, and then you just start explaining things immediately. That would be better for you, because I would like it if the 3 to 4 pages of writing is all analysis and not just stage setting. You know, the introduction and conclusion is kind of like, here's what I'm going to say. That's your intro and the conclusion. And there's what I just said. So, you know, you can dispense with that little formality in this paper if you like, and just go straight into the prompt. Also, in philosophy, especially contemporary modern philosophy writing, the genre of writing is much more cold, clinical, legalistic, rather than what you might be thinking is judged to be good writing. So like sometimes people think good writing is the most verbose, the biggest words that you could possibly use. You know, like you're trying to write like some kind of poet. But in philosophy, you should just be straightforward. So a little less Faulkner and a little more Hemingway to those that know anything about English literature. Just be clear, straightforward, as though you're trying to explain this to an intelligent high school sophomore or something. Don't fly over their head with the biggest words you can possibly think of. Just get right to the point and be clear and direct. So you want to write more like a lawyer than like a poet or something. You're presenting an argument. You're presenting different arguments, and you're trying to adjudicate which one is the better one. So try and reach for that kind of clinical, straightforward, direct mode of presentation. Andrea, to be clear, yes, you do not need an intro or a conclusion. You do not. Okay. So that's really everything I guess I wanted to say about the paper prompts. You've got plenty of time to work on them. You know, starting today, you've got 2 weeks. Last piece of advice is that I would say, for your own best sake, probably you don't want to wait necessarily to the last minute to write a paper on these topics. Sometimes students are pressed for time, and I definitely can understand that. But if you find yourself in a situation where you're working against the deadline and you've put it off to the last minute, it gets very difficult to sometimes gather your thoughts on these heady topics when you're rushing against deadlines. So I think you should try to always write things in a leisurely way, give yourself plenty of time. If you do that and you finish a draft early enough, not only do you feel like you got something, and therefore you're not as stressed out about it, but you give yourself the opportunity to go back and revise and make any changes So that's my advice to you, but you'll make your own decisions and do the best that you can. Okay, so are we good then on the paper prompts for now? If anyone else had any questions to throw out there, definitely happy to take them while we're here in the live stream. If not, for the moment then, I'll go back to our lecture. Yeah? Are we good to go? I suppose so. Well, if you do have questions, you'll let me know in the chat. All right. So let's get back on track with our lecture here. Remind me, didn't we finish last time with the discussion of Pascal's wager? Isn't that correct? We did the whole Pascal wager thing. And did we also talk about Clifford yet or not yet? Let me know. What's the last note that you have? God is real because he's real. Well, that's a little too direct, isn't it, AJ? Yeah, so we didn't talk about Clifford, but we did the Pascal, right? So wager was the last thing. Okay, yeah. So I'm going to move on from the wager, but I'll say the last summary of it, even though I just kind of did summarize it in this talk of the prompt. Pascal doesn't want to necessarily prove God exists because he says that can't be proven. He says the only thing that we know is that he either exists or doesn't exist. And you're gonna have to make a choice about which thing you think is true, that he does or doesn't. So since you're put in a position where you got a wager, the question then just becomes what's the better bet? And as I talked to you guys before, he would argue that it's much safer for you to just believe because you're not really risking anything and you might benefit. But if you choose not to believe, you're putting a lot at risk, the condition of your immortal soul if it does exist. And you don't have any prospects for a benefit in case you don't believe, even if you're right. So he thinks it's better to believe. All right, now, after that, the next author as we go through the series is a man named W.K. Clifford, okay? W.K. Clifford. So W.K. Clifford was a British philosopher who lived a short but impactful life. Let me give you the dates here. I gotta get it in the book. I think it's 1873. Get it here. Yeah, 1845 to 1879. So W.K. Clifford was a British mathematician and philosopher. He had, pretty short life, but even in that life, he had a big impact. He was named a fellow of the British Royal Society for his work in mathematics at the young age of 29. And in 1877, he wrote this classic essay that we're now going to look at, which is called The Ethics of Belief. So just to start us off, the man's name, dates of his life, title of the piece, and the publication date. The ethics of belief. So first off, the word ethics, we're going to dive right into that next week. It's our next topic in the class. Just a preview. Ethics is all about morality and right and wrong, what's good and bad. So this paper is about what's the morality or the right and wrong of how we form beliefs. According to Clifford, there's one way of forming beliefs that people sometimes have a habit of doing, but it's really bad, wrong, and it's actually unethical. So by seeing his position, we will actually learn about one way of responding to the Pascal's wager. Remember in that first essay prompt, one of the options is to talk about Pascal versus Anselm, and you need 2 objections to each for a total of 4 objections, 2 to Anselm, 2 to Pascal. Clifford could be one of those 2 objections to Pascal for reasons that I will explain. So to start off the whole discussion in his paper, he offers us a hypothetical scenario, which is, I think you're starting to get the picture that that's kind of a common tactic in a lot of philosophy writing. So here we have a hypothetical scenario, and it's the case of the ship owner. So I'm just writing out the words, the ship owner. Example. Okay, so a lot of this example is something that I'm just going to talk you through because it's kind of almost, it's like a storybook type of example. Therefore, speech is a little bit better way effectively to communicate it than writing a ton of bullet points. But I'll give you some visuals to kind of keep your mind on the topic. So here's the ship owner. It's this guy. and he owns a ship, so this is the ship. Okay? Now, this owner of the ship knows everything about it. He knows every little detail of what's going on with the ship, what needs repairs, how old it is, what its condition is. And the thing about the ship is that it's actually in really bad shape. So I'm drawing right now like a crack in the hull, which is leaking water. Here's another one. Maybe there's the bent, broken mast. You know, it's old, it's rickety, the boards are loose. This is a ship that nobody would want to sail in. Something that is allowed to sail, you know, because it's in the harbor, kind of on the dock. But if this ship were really allowed to go out into the water for any significant travel, it's very, very probable that what could happen, you think, to the ship. This is a badly damaged ship, really poor condition. If you let this ship sail out there, what could very well happen? That it could sink, right, Ricardo? It could sink, and the thing is, our ship owner guy, he knows that. He knows that 100%. If you ask him, how's your ship doing? He'll tell you, oh, it's seen better days, my friend. This ship's not doing good. The ship is about to fall apart. It's like, if it sails anywhere, I don't know. The chances are very high that it's going to sink. Can't say for sure, but it probably would because of how damaged it is, all right? Now, despite all that, despite him knowing all of that, right? Knowing better than anybody. Who knows a person's car or whatever better than them, right? So he knows his ship and how badly damaged it is for sure. But the thing is, he wants to let it sail one more time. He wants to believe that if it just makes one more trip, maybe that one will work out okay. Because perhaps, you know, he has an interest in it successfully taking on one more venture. Maybe he can make money off of that last venture or something. So even though he knows the evidence shows that that it's probably going to sink, he has this hope and this wishful thinking that makes him want to believe that, nah, actually, it can make maybe one more trip. It can make just one more little trip, I think. So what this man then does is he tries to suppress all of his doubts. They're very reasonable doubts that this ship can successfully make its journey. He tries to push those thoughts out of his mind. I was probably going to sing, I don't think about that. Just stop thinking about that. And then he replaces those thoughts with all these hopes and dreams, like maybe it's going to make one more trip. I mean, it's done so many in the past, right? So what's just one more trip? That's going to make it. So basically, he convinces himself to believe that the ship will make one more successful trip. But what is that belief based on, that the ship is going to work out? It's not based on the evidence, because what's the evidence showing him? That it's dangerous and that it probably will sink. So anyway, you understand how it starts. This is a bad ship. He knows it. But he convinces himself that it can make one more journey just based on hope, not based on evidence. So then he does let it sail, okay? And now as the little story continues, there's two alternative endings to the case, okay? So let me give you version 1 and version 2. First version of the situation. So, you know, the ship was damaged and he knows how badly damaged it is, but he hopes it'll work out, so he lets it sail one more time. In the first version of our scenario, let's say that the ship then does in fact sink. It sinks, okay? So it sinks, a bunch of people that were on this ship die in the ocean, and whatever cargo and stuff that it was holding, that's all going to be destroyed because it's now on the bottom of the ocean floor too. Is that good? Oh, that's terrible. So in that situation where the ship sinks, what would you say, guys? Did he do something wrong by letting it sail or what? Yes, Carl, the argument from design is also known as the teleological argument. But again, to my question, 1 second. Did he do something wrong, you guys think, when I gave you the scenario where the ship sinks after he let it sail? Yeah, right. Okay, Ronald, you're saying he did do something wrong. He chanced it. Wait, Sierra, you're saying no? Why not? I gotta get you to open up on that. Why do you say he didn't do nothing wrong? I mean, people's dead now. How's that not wrong? What are you thinking? Well, Sierra, you can let me know. It is what it is. Let's not be funny and casual about people dying, everybody. I know that's, you know, it's like some people just getting hardened to the thought, well, we're all going to die, right? But, like, it's not a good thing, is it? You don't want to die today, do you? So dying's not good. This ship is full of dead people now, and he let it sail. Now, why is it wrong? Why is it wrong? It's wrong because he knew how dangerous it was. He can't throw up his hands and be like, hey, this is a completely unforeseeable thing. Wait, no, Sierra, that's not correct according to this author. The hope is not rational. There's people's lives at risk. So he's not supposed to just use hope when evidence shows that these people are going to die if he takes a risk with their lives. So it's wrong because it's not based on any kind of rational evidence. Hope is not evidence. So it is wrong to believe just based on hope. That's what the author's saying. But anyway, to the others, it's wrong that he allows the ship to sail. It's wrong, obviously, when the ship sinks, right? But let me give you another version of the situation. Take the case where same ship, same owner, it's damaged, and it's likely to sink, and he knows that, but he hopes and wishes that it'll work out. So imagine in version 2 that just by good luck, good fortune, it worked out. The ship did make it back on that one journey. So in this second version of the case, nobody died, nobody drowned. It actually worked out. Would you say that in that second case that he did something wrong, or was it not wrong because it all worked out? What do you think about case 2, version 2 of the case? I'm asking a yes or no question. Is it wrong or not in the second version that he let it sail? Still wrong because he did put their lives in danger. Yeah, exactly. Ricardo, gotta just reprimand you on this. Yeah, it's still wrong. It's like, let me give you an example. Maybe this will also help you up there, Sierra. Take a drunk driver, you heard me? Person's drunk, way too drunk, and they know they're too drunk. They got a breathalyzer that they carry with them. Just, they blow into it, it's showing 0.2. Oh my goodness. They're slurring their speech. This person's too drunk. Now, is it okay for them to drive? Well, no, but what if they just hope and believe that it's going to work out? I wish and hope that it'll work out. That's my hope. I don't want to get in an accident. I don't want to hit nobody. I know I'm too drunk and it's dangerous, and I could hit people. That's the evidence. But I hope and wish that it won't happen. So, let me just go with what I'm hoping. Now, suppose he hits people. Did he do something wrong? Yes, obviously. This is just a parallel to the case given by the author. But take another version of that situation. He drinks, drives, knowing it's dangerous, but he doesn't hit anybody. It's possible for a person to luck out on open roads and make it to their destination, right? So say he got home safe, even though he's drunk as hell. Was it wrong, or is your thought, no harm, no foul? It didn't hit people, so how can you say it's wrong? That's still wrong. I'm not talking about it didn't produce bad consequences in the second situation, of course. It didn't produce the negative consequences of death, injury, damage to property, but it's still wrong because it very well could have, and it was risky. So to defy the evidence of danger and threat and risk, and instead to go with what you just hope, the point the author's making is that's something wrong to do. And using that example then, he states a principle, okay? So the whole ship owner example is just used to sort of bring us to this point where we see this principle that says, it is wrong always, anywhere, and for anyone to believe anything without sufficient evidence. Okay, so he derives this conclusion. This is the moral of the story, so to speak, from the whole ship owner scenario. Were the people that went on the ship aware of its condition? No, the ship owner was. Okay, so don't try to say they did. They took their own risks. They undertook a risk. If you're going to get on a space shuttle, it might blow up in the air. It's a dangerous proposition, so don't blame the person who owned it. No, it's not like that. He's the only person who knew. Here, I'll read you then from the book. He says, a ship owner was about to send to sea a ship. He knew that she was old and not over well built at the first, that she had seen many seas and climes and had often needed repairs. Doubts had been suggested to him that possibly she was not seaworthy. The doubts preyed upon his mind and made him unhappy. He thought that perhaps he ought to have her thoroughly overhauled and refitted, even though this would put him to great expense. Before the ship sailed, however, he succeeded in overcoming these thoughts. he said to himself that, she had gone safely through so many other voyages and weathered so many storms, that she should come home safely from this trip also. He would put his trust in Providence, which is kind of like the provision of good luck or good fortune, which could hardly fail to protect all those unhappy families that were leaving their fatherland to seek for better times elsewhere. He would dismiss from his mind all ungenerous suspicions. In such ways, he acquired a sincere belief and a comfortable conviction that the ship was thoroughly safe and seaworthy. He watched her depart with a light heart and benevolent wishes for the success. And when he went down, he got insurance money, and the people that died told no tales. Now he says, what shall we say of him? Surely this, that he was very guilty of the death of those men. It's admitted that he did believe in the soundness of the ship, but he had no right to believe in that because of the evidence that he had. He had acquired his belief not by honest or patient investigation, but by setting aside and suppressing his doubts. And although in the end he may have felt so sure about it, inasmuch as he had knowingly and willingly worked himself into that frame of mind, he must be held responsible for it. And then he says, let's alter the case, and he goes into the other version of it where no accident happens. Let us alter the case a little, and suppose that the ship made her voyage safely. Will that diminish the guilt of the owner? No. When an action is once done, it is wrong or right forever. No accidental failure of its good or evil fruit can possibly alter that. The man would not have been innocent. He would only have not been found out. Sort of like our drunk driver, right? He gets home safely. Did he do nothing wrong? No, he did do something wrong. It's just that he didn't get caught because nothing bad ended up happening. But that doesn't mean that we should tell people there's nothing wrong with that as long as there's no bad outcomes. So this leads us to the appreciation of that principle, which is generalized from the case of the ship. Now he's saying it's not just this randomly chosen, made-up case of a ship owner, but it's all of us in all of our lives who have a moral obligation, he thinks, to not just form beliefs without sufficient evidence. When you form beliefs, they're not based on good evidence, but instead like hope or wishful thinking, you definitely, he argues, do something wrong because you cause harm to both yourself and to other people. So let me try and talk about why he thinks that is so harmful and problematic. He says that the type of person who doesn't follow this principle, that just believes what they think makes them happy or what they hope to be true, a person who does that has what he will call a credulous character. It's a term that now we have to introduce. So what is a credulous character? The ship owner is one type of person who's that, a credulous character. So credulous character. So what it means is this is a type of person who will believe claims or statements that are not justified by sufficient evidence. Okay. Okay, so a credulous character believes things, but even when there's not good evidence to prove it or to demonstrate that it's true. So a credulous character, the word credulous has to do with the term credibility, meaning how likely you think something is to be true, how much credence that you place in something. So the credulous character gives too much credence or credibility to things, more than they deserve. It's the kind of person who believes things and gives credibility to claims that actually don't deserve to be regarded as plausible because they're not justified by good enough evidence. Now, why would you think that a person would want to believe things that are not supported by good enough evidence? Well, it's because they want to believe something that might not be true, right? I mean, if there's good enough evidence to support it, then they would be justified in believing it. When you believe something that's not justified by the evidence, it's probably because the evidence points in a different direction and you don't like where it's pointing. Right? Like the evidence shows that you got to evacuate your house or something because the brush fire's coming. But you're a person that's full of hope and wishful thought. And you're like, well, it's very inconvenient for me to evacuate my house. So even though the evidence and the fire marshal and all the authorities are telling me I got to leave and get off of this house and evacuate the property, I'm just going to believe everything will work out in my favor because that's what I would like and that's what I hope, even though the evidence doesn't show that at all. You know, a person might believe that they don't have a terminal illness, even though they got a credible diagnosis by a medical expert, and they just keep seeking more and different opinions to try and falsify the accurate diagnosis. Even though it's based on good evidence, they don't want to believe it. And what they do believe is based on no good evidence. So people are not intellectually strong who have this credulous type of character. It's the sort of person who can't face uncomfortable truths or follow evidence wherever it leads, even if it leads in a direction that's not so congenial to the person's self-interest. The thing about the world is it doesn't revolve around any individual person's self-interest. So you have to be well apprised of the facts so that you know how to act and respond to them, especially in situations where they don't align with what you would prefer, okay? A credulous character made through trust issues, I don't really know. I'm not a psychologist. It's probably just fear of danger, you know, and it's totally irrational, right? Because if you're really afraid of the psychological discomfort of like fearing that your house is going to get burned down, aren't you going to be more afraid of it actually being burned down because you refuse to heed the advice of the authorities, right? Like if you're afraid of losing control of your health because you are in a world where there's a pandemic, so you then refuse to believe that it's serious, isn't that a worse situation for you to be in, making yourself feel comfortable through believing falsehoods and thus not actually acting in a way that prevents the harm from arising in your life? You know, so a credulous character is doing themselves a disservice. You know, they're trying to promote within themselves like a belief in their safety, security, or immunity from risk. But that's being unrealistic, and it's preventing them from taking the right actions. So it's actually quite a big problem, and it's interesting how it does touch on things that are happening in our world today, because Clifford clearly had no knowledge or insight into any of these things, right, at that time. So yeah, that's a credulous character. Now he says it's bad and it's wrong to have a credulous character. Let me read what he said, all right? He said, just getting the right part of the text here. He says, this being premise, in the first place, let us admit, so far as it goes, even when a man's belief is so fixed that he cannot think otherwise, he still has a choice in regard to the action suggested by it, and so he cannot escape the duty of investigating on the ground of the strength of his convictions. Because those who are not yet capable of controlling their feelings and thoughts must have a plain rule dealing with overt acts. But this is not sufficient. It is not possible to sever the belief from the action it suggests as to condemn the one without condemning the other. So what he's saying here is, it was wrong for the ship owner in our example to even believe that the ship would successfully sail. Why is that wrong? Because it led to the action of allowing it to sail. Now, allowing it to sail, the action taken, is clearly wrong because it led to the death or the possible death of all the passengers on the ship. But the belief is the thing which gives rise to the action later. You know, you only do things when you believe that you should do them. So this is a bad action, but it springs from an irrational belief before it. And what he's arguing is that the belief is also wrong. It was wrong for him not merely to have allowed the ship to sail, but to even form the wishful thinking, hopeful belief in his mind that everything's going to work out fine. So he says, nor is it truly a belief at all, which doesn't have some influence upon the actions of him who holds it. So he says, if you're the type of person who habitually reinforces this credulous character, believing things without any good evidence, not believing things that are based on good evidence, if that's the way you operate in life, you undermine your own best interests. And he says it this way: he who truly believes that which prompts him to an action has committed it already in his heart. If a belief is not realized immediately in open deeds, it is stored up for the guidance of the future. It goes to make a part of that aggregate of beliefs which is the link between sensation and action at every moment of all our lives. No real belief, however trifling and fragmentary it may seem, is ever truly insignificant. It prepares us to receive more of its like, confirms those which resembled it before, and weakens others. And so gradually it lays a stealthy train in our inmost thoughts, which may someday explode into overt action and leave its stamp upon our character forever. So let me then use that as a segue to talk about the two kinds of harms that come from having a credulous character. He says there's self-harm and there's social harm that comes from having a credulous character. self-harm and social harm. The self-harm element is that if you develop this habit intellectually in your life of being credulous, believing whatever you hope is true, regardless of whether the evidence verifies it, and disbelieving things that are based on good evidence, if you dislike now that harm yourself, because it weakens and it degrades your powers of judgment. It makes you a poor judge of what is true and false. Makes you a poor judge of what's true and false. And unable to face uncomfortable truths. Let me give a little space, extra space. Okay, so if you have a credulous character, you're not so good at judging what's true and false, what's correct and incorrect. Because to the credulous character, if there's a claim, even if it's based on very good evidence, but they don't like the claim, if it scares them or if it's disturbing to them, then they will not be able to agree that it's true, even if it's evidently true. So credulous characters are not the sort of people that you would go to ask for their judgment on an issue, because they're only going to make judgments that align with their perceived self-interest, not in alignment with the facts and the evidence. So an uncomfortable fact that's verified by evidence is going to be rejected by the credulous character. And on the other hand, an unjustified claim that has no sound basis in evidence is going to be believed by them just because they prefer for that to be true. So that's self-harming. If you operate in that way, then you're never going to be able to appreciate the threats, risks, and dangers that you might face in life. And you'll kind of be like the ostrich that buries their head in the sand and says, I just don't want to know about those things or pretend that they don't exist. You know, so if you have a wildfire or tsunami bearing down on your house, you might want to think it's not going to hit my house, and that makes you feel comforted. But if you had actually paid attention to the evidence, then you would have taken the realistic and necessary actions to prevent against the loss of your property or maybe the loss of your life. It's kind of like, you know, we talk about the COVID thing a lot. People, of course, don't want to believe that we're going to have like 200,000 dead people, because how horrifying is that? But if you told people in the first place that that's probably going to happen unless we do X, Y, and Z, then they would have been able to better prepare for it. So, you know, having a credulous character, especially within the realm of positions of high authority and power, can be hugely destructive of human life. So there's self-harm. But there's also social harm. The social harm is just kind of the same, but it's because you spread that tendency to other people. That's all. So the social harm aspect is that you will influence other people to take on the same habit, to have a credulous character too. Sorry, let me restate that. You will cause people who are influenced by you to also have a credulous character. Credulous character. I know it's a little harder to read at the bottom, but you know, it's easy enough when I say it. You will cause people who are influenced by you to also have a credulous character. So the idea here is that this tendency doesn't just stick with you, it spreads to other people too. And every one of us, no matter how limited our sphere of influence is, we do have some friends, some family, some peers, and some members within our community who look up to us. So like say that, you know, you're the sort of person who just says, I always hope for the best, and I just ignore information that says things might not be going well, like the ship owner, right? Suppose you had like a little brother or sister. They look up to you. They're going to be like, oh, okay, well, you know, my big bro or sis, that's the way they operate. They have this kind of credulous character, so that's okay. That's how people should be. That's how I'm going to be too. And now they have that same habit. And then in their own life, they spread it further and further. And you might think, oh, isn't it innocent though? Isn't it innocent enough? You know, it's just believing what you want to believe. Isn't that my own business? He says it's not a private matter at all, because if we create a world in which people don't have any respect for facts and evidence in the way that they form their beliefs, then we're all going to suffer and be much worse off. You know, do you really want to go to a doctor and the doctor says, you know, let's just hope for the best and, you know, you're probably going to be fine. Let's take the most rosy, sunniest possible perspective on your diagnosis and course of treatment. Do you really want a person who's going to try and provide you with legal advice to say, oh, you're going to win this case, don't worry about it. Let's not even worry about all the ways that maybe your case could be undermined. You know, so living in a world where no one has respect for facts and evidence is a dangerous world to live in. And we don't want that to happen. We don't want that tendency to spread so widely that people have no understanding anymore of what's likely to happen or how to judge the merit of a claim based on evidence. So you can contribute to a better world, or you can contribute to a world that's falling apart where we can't trust expertise and intellectual authority. So he says we should wield the influence that we have over other people with great care. That's why he says it's not just people in high positions of authority like presidents, heads of states, that have this burden to try not to be a credulous character. He says it's our obligation across the board, because even in the limited circumstances we find ourselves in, we still have some influence over the other people. And if you multiply that across society, it's actually quite impactful. Yeah, so we should strive not to have the credulous character, or if we do, we're making the world a worse place and the kind of world that we would not want to live in. Do you really want to be, let's say, accused of a crime, and then the jurors come in and they're like, I don't know, I just feel like he's guilty. It's too difficult for me to think through all the evidence why maybe the person's innocent. You want the person to make the judgment based on the actual evidence and not to have prejudice, bias, fear, or favor influencing their decision. So let me read a little more from this book, and he says that. He says, no man's belief is in any case a private matter which concerns himself alone. Our lives are guided by that general conception of the course of things which has been created by society for social purposes. Our words, phrases, forms and processes and modes of thought are common property, fashioned and perfected from age to age, an heirloom which every succeeding generation inherits as a precious deposit and a sacred trust, to be handed on to the next one, not unchanged, but enlarged and purified. Into this, for good or ill, is woven every belief of every man who has speech of his fellows, an awful privilege and an awful responsibility that we should help to create the world in which posterity will live. Now, you might think, okay, well, if it's a ship owner case, fair enough. Life is on the line there. That's life and death. He should form beliefs about whether to let that ship sail using only the best evidence. But what if I'm a person who just has beliefs that don't have any particular impact, or you know, there's no life and death stakes? If I choose to believe in aliens right now, like they're out there in outer space, just because I love science fiction, what's wrong with that? You know, it's a belief. It's maybe not justified enough by the evidence to say I've got great support for it. But what if I just want to believe that? Is that really harmful? Clifford's a tough customer, and he's going to say, yeah, even that's wrong. It's always wrong. It's always wrong everywhere for anyone to believe anything, not just the important things, but even the little trivial things you shouldn't be believing without good enough evidence. Because I guess as he sees it, that habit is bound to spill over into more important cases later. Like when you're just the person who's thinking, I want to believe that my team's going to win, so that's what I think. Maybe that's innocent enough. But the next time it's like, I want to believe that I don't need to take this medicine, or I want to believe that I don't need to evacuate my house, or I want to believe that, you know, this loved one that I have is going to not need a certain type of treatment because it's uncomfortable, even though it's the most effective treatment. So the point I'm making is that the credulous character and the way of forming beliefs that instills within you, it cannot be like contained just to the safe beliefs that don't have the potential to harm anybody else. That's why he says we really better be careful with the influence that we do have over other people, not to be brought into the comforting but ultimately self-destructive and socially destructive habit of having beliefs that don't have anything to do with evidence and that are simply responsive to our desires and wishes. You know, the world doesn't revolve around one person's self-interest or what they hope or wish. I think that the sooner that we realize that, you know, we'll actually have a better chance at mitigating a lot of the problems that we see going on. But that's his point. That's Clifford's point. Now, in the end, you can definitely see his argument as one way of pushing back against Pascal's wager. And let me now connect those two pieces. Pascal says, believe in God. You ought to believe in God. But does he say because the reason is because there's great proof? Here's all this evidence that proves that God exists. What did Pascal say about evidence proving that God exists? Did he say that we had that evidence, or that we could just prove it using evidence? What was Pascal's thought on that question? Who remembers that? Pascal says, why should we believe in God? Because of proof? What's the reason he gave? Wager, Pascal's wager, heads and tails, coin flip guy. What did he say was the real reason that we should believe? Well, he said it's safer to do that, but the claim that these are evidence that God exists. I'm not asking you should believe because of the evidence. He says it's the better gamble, you get more out of it, right? But you guys are not coming back to the point I'm trying to make. Did he say you should believe in God because we can prove that he exists? I know the reason he said you should believe is because you want to be risk averse. But that kind of bypasses a different question. What's the evidence that God exists? Remember the beginning of his paper. He comes right out and he says nobody can prove God exists because nobody could even understand what God is if he existed. He says, therefore, I have no evidence to prove or to disprove, and neither do you and neither does anybody. So he starts off his essay saying very, very definitively, no, I can't prove God exists. No, you can't prove he doesn't exist. There's no proof that was possible either way. So he says, we're never going to get that proof. We're never going to get that evidence. Then he says, but I want you to believe, not based on evidence, but because if you're right, it'll be to your best interests. Now, the ship owner, does he have evidence that the ship is going to make it out there? No. But he has a hope that it will, and it would be in his best interest if it worked out in his favor. So it's kind of like Pascal invites us to be like the ship owner, to just cast our belief in a direction which we think might end up helping us, but which we don't really have any evidence to support. And anyway, whether we agree or don't agree with Mr. Clifford, as he argues, that's wrong. That's like believing in something without sufficient evidence. The only good reason or legitimate reason to believe in anything, he says, is because there's solid evidence to back it up and prove it. So if you don't have the evidence, you shouldn't be believing something. And you shouldn't just be believing it because you hope it'll turn out to be true. That's seen in the case of God, and that's also seen in the ship owner case. So this is an objection that could be used against Pascal, because Pascal invites us to believe in God evidence-free, just based on the hope and wishful thought that in case we're right, we prevent ourselves against loss. But believing in things based on hope and wishful thinking is not the proper basis. Clifford tries to make the case in this essay through the presentation of the ship owner example and then the principles that come from that case. Now, towards the end of his paper, it seems as though he doesn't come right out and say it, but he verges closely to just coming out and saying, and this has some application to the question of God. He doesn't say it directly, but it seems like that's looming in the background of this quote. He says here on page 53, if a man holding a belief which he was taught in childhood or persuaded of afterwards keeps down and pushes away any doubts that arise about it in his mind, purposely avoids reading books and the company of men that question it or discuss it, and regards as impious, a religious term, so that's, I think, revealing, regards as impious those questions which cannot easily be asked without disturbing it, the life of that man is one long sin against mankind. And that's also, I think, clever phrasing. A sin against mankind is being committed by a person who believes things and refuses to consider any doubts, even if they're based on good rational evidence. So, I mean, it might be that he mentions there, or he's thinking there, of a belief in God that a person forms in childhood without any evidence. Now, if that's an objection, though, it really only applies to a belief in God which is formed on the basis of hope and faith without any evidence. Not every belief in God is based on that. We've heard arguments that try to give at least rational evidence, conceptual arguments for the existence of God. So this point by Clifford would not apply, like, for example, to the design argument or cosmological or ontological, which at least try to give some reasons that God does exist. But it would apply to Pascal, who says, I have no reasons to give you, but here is something that you should believe because it would be better if you're right. So this is a kind of argument that, does criticize a way of forming beliefs that's unresponsive to evidence, but is responsive to the person's desires. And the last thing, as I'm just letting us go, on the final page of his paper, he says, some people might argue, but I don't have time for all that. Who has time to look at all the evidence for every claim? So you might say, if I'm going to have a belief about global warming or something, according to Clifford, I would have to research the literature first and have an informed and an educated opinion. But I don't have time for all that, so can't I form my beliefs without looking into all the evidence? It's too time-consuming. What he says then to that person is, if you don't have time to look at the evidence before you make up your mind on something, then you shouldn't think that you have time to form a belief. That's like prejudging the belief before you get the evidence, which is getting the operations out of order. You're supposed to form a belief, but only after you look at evidence. Otherwise, you're prejudging the question. So he says, if you don't feel like you've got the time in your schedule to like analyze the information that bears on a question, then you should just say, I'm not going to judge on that question yet until I look at the evidence later. Okay. Well, everybody, I've covered, I guess, the Clifford for us today. So we're doing pretty well overall in our class. We're doing pretty good on the schedule. We're going to just cover McKim on Thursday, and after that you'll have everything that you need for the paper prompt number 1 if you choose to write on it. If you want to write on number 2, you already have that stuff, and we've talked about it before. So yeah, no, Gabe, this is not an argument for the existence of God. This is a criticism of Pascal's wager. Clifford is saying don't believe things without evidence. Like that's what the ship owner did, and that was wrong. It could lead to people dying, or even if it doesn't, it gives you a habit that is going to show itself later in a way that's harmful, either individually or at the social level. So don't believe things based on no good evidence. That's what the ship owner did, and maybe that's what he thinks a person like Pascal is inviting you to do when it comes to God. If you're believing in God just because you hope he's real, and it's scary to think that he doesn't exist, but there's no evidence to prove it, that's bad. It's bad and wrong to believe it because of that. You got to have evidence. That's all he's saying. Okay, guys, thank you so much. Have a great day then, and I'll see you back on Thursday. Take care.